Hey, what's up, people? This is Dr. Patrick with Human First Health and Movement, and concerning all the craziness that's going on today, I wanted to share with you some of my concerns with regard to the lack of activity that we're going to be experiencing and something called lower cross syndrome. So, if you don't already know, I think most personal trainers are usually have some familiarity with lower cross syndrome, but essentially it's this: if we have people who are seated a lot, for instance, our populace right now, at least in the US and around the world, with shelter in place and quarantine restrictions, our bodies basically are going to be adapting to that position. So if we're in a seated position a lot, let's say I have the back of my chair here, my hip flexors are going to be a little bit tight, my back's going to be a little bit tight. Lower cross syndrome refers to a relationship between these cross muscles. So if we have a lower quadrant here, let's say my hip flexors and my glutes, that's the lower quadrant. My upper quadrant would be like my abdominal group, my obliques, etc., and my low back. So this quadrant, this quadrant. There's a relationship between these two and these two. Like I said, hip flexors are going to be tight, low back is also going to be tight because of the positioning that we're in. So this is basically a lengthened position for the hip flexor, okay? And when we sit down, all that tissue approximates. And depending on the health of that tissue may want to stick together. And if we train in that position, if this is how we stay for a long time, our body's gonna get used to that. So neurologically, that muscle's also gonna wanna shorten. So you're kind of fighting a couple battles to get out of this position if this is where we spend most of our time. So if we have working from home in addition to all the other stuff that we're used to doing at home, like Netflix and Amazon or whatever, this can be problematic because it develops a kind of neurological tightness in these muscles, and in the glutes and hamstring, those are kind of neurologically dampened. Especially if you are sitting in like an office chair or something, there's a lot of contact stress on the back of your hamstring, again further dampening this effect of this muscle being lengthened and also having to stay in that lengthened position for a while. Same thing with obliques and rectus abdominis, etc. So everything around the front of the core basically doesn't have to do anything because we're sitting against the back of a chair. So again, neurologically, your brain says, hey, I'm not using this, let's start shutting off the lights for there. And it creates this imbalance that we call lower cross syndrome. So how do we avoid that? Well, what we don't want to do is just ignore it, right? So if we ignore it, essentially, when we come out of that position, our body still wants to be like this. Our body still wants that hip flexor tight, still wants that low back tight. That creates a lot of jamming in the back, a lot of muscular strain, as well as like jamming in the facets, like joint on joint, not good. And in the front, it creates this kind of compression that is really tough to get out of and can limit our hip extension, so we can get like knee, hip, low back problems, stuff like that. This is what I usually see in my clinic. Now, I'm a sports chiropractor. As you can see, this is not your typical chiropractic office. About half of what I do is rehab and soft tissue work. So in addition to my degree as a chiropractor, I'm also a certified office ergonomics evaluator through HumanScale, as well as a certified personal trainer through NFPT. So I want to basically give you my solution for lower cross syndrome, which is super easy to do at home, only takes a couple minutes, and I want you to think of this as like little nuggets of knowledge. Okay, I'm bringing in kind of the best from a lot of different worlds, from the chiropractic world, from the PT world, from the personal training world, right? From the office ergonomics world. So this is what we're going to do. We basically have an imbalance between like length tension relationships in the lower extremity and lower core. So what are we going to do here? We want to do a little bit of body hacking. So a little bit of body hacking for the hamstring, a little bit of body hacking for the quad, and then some cool techniques for low back and abdominals. So let's start with the hamstring. You're getting a basic hamstring stretch, so seated, legs out in front, toes up, so don't let them hang out like this, okay? First thing we're gonna do is try and get our chest in as much as possible. I just started my morning, so this is kind of gonna be a good example of how tight I am. I'm not touching my toes yet, okay? I can force it. Yeah. but I don't want to do that, okay? So toes up, chest in, arms out, big breath. Exhale, reach a little bit further. And what you're going to do is you're going to tighten up your hold, posterior chain, your glutes, everything else, press in. So imagine someone's got a rug, they're trying to pull it out from under me, and I'm trying to grab it with my heels. We don't want to grab like this. Whole leg has to come in. So toes up, chest in, arms out, big breath. And start pressing. It's going to look like I'm doing nothing. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly relax, shake it out, wiggle, 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 shake, shake, shake. It's called autogenic inhibition. It's a PNF technique. We're basically playing around with muscle spindles, versicle detent organ. I could get into it, but I just want to show you kind of what to do in the instructions. So if you're more interested, you can dig a little bit deeper or reach out to me. But we're going to do this 3 times. My protocol, 3 times, 10 seconds each, okay? Chest in, arms out, big breath. And press, 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 press. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, relax. It shouldn't be too uncomfortable. You should just go to where your comfort zone is for as far as like what tension your body can handle. Chest in, arms out, big breath last time. And press, 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 press. 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Relax. Wiggle, 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 shake, 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 and then check and see where you're at. Okay, so that feels a lot more comfortable for me. I just basically got 6 inches of length tension out of my hamstring and posterior chain that stretches everything through the back, through the glutes, through the hamstrings, back the kneecap, etc. So depending on where you're the tightest, that may be where you feel the most. Some people experience it here, some people experience it here, some people experience it up in the top of their back. It just depends on the target tissue that's stopping you from getting that the rest of the way. And that can last for a good long while. So my recommendation is doing stuff like this twice a day. So hamstring or posterior chain, we want to do 10 seconds 3 times. Same thing with the quads. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you can imagine this is the position. We can go on our side. We can also be standing. Okay. For those of us with hips, make sure you're on a soft surface, or else it's going to be a little bit jarring. Okay. So from here, knee out. We don't want it here. Right, tight hip flexor, we want to stretch the quad and the top of the hip flexor, okay? Or rather the bottom of the hip flexor, top of the quad. We want the knee, hip, and shoulder in alignment, okay? In one line, so don't break that line, zigzag. We want it to be here. You bring your heel back as close to your bum as you can, not out here, not way over here, right in the center, okay? So you're basically stretching this line of tissue, okay? Hold on to your ankle rather than up here at your toes. Bring it back. And then you're going to press in your hand, okay? So bring it on to stretch. What I should see in a relatively healthy individual that doesn't have a history of like knee stuff is the heel should be able to get to the bum, and then you press in from there, or at least press in, press in, press in 3 times, 10 seconds until the heel gets to the bum, okay? So that's hamstring and quad, basically. And the next one we want to do is low back, okay? So low back, knees going to be bent to alleviate stress off of the psoas and iliacus, etc., the other hip flexors. We should have a space between the low back and the ground right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make that space disappear. So I'm going to do a posterior pelvic tilt. I'm going to roll my pelvis posteriorly, right? This is called counter nutation, right? So nutation is where the sacrum is nodding. If it nods forward, that is nutation. Counter nutation the other way. So rotation back here, pressing to the ground. Again, if someone's has a rope down there and they're trying to tug it out, you're trying to squish it. What we don't want is our abdominal fascia and everything else here to be tight. Okay, your tendency is going to want to tighten up right here. Okay, but I want you to dissociate those low back flexors from the front of the core. Okay, so I want you to take 2 good breaths and dissociate. Make sure it can distend and maintain tension before we roll back to neutral. So got that space back again. So roll back, 2 breaths while I'm squishing. You can put your hand under here to cue somebody or yourself. And roll back to center, okay? Do that 5 times, that's it. 5 times, roll back, 2 breaths. Belly breaths, okay? So That can help the core, that can help reduce tension through this area, as well as help kind of lengthen some of the tissue in the low back, just subtly in a safe way. Last one is going to be just a little myofascial kind of trigger point technique. What we're going to do is buddy up our fingers like this, just so we don't put a whole lot of pressure through one finger. You're going to find a line of tension in your obliques, essentially, okay? If our rib cage is closed down in the front and it's used to that position and wants to stay that way, we don't want that. So what I want you to do is sit up as nice and tall as possible. I want you to find some line of tension through the obliques or even the rectus that feels a little bit too ropey, okay? So I got a ropey spot right here. I can rotate my body to try and make it pop out a little bit. There we go, okay? So this guy right here, I'm going to basically go over it. So if here's the rope, I'm just going to do this, cross friction. Okay, it's a little massage technique. And we're just going to do that while we're breathing. We do 20 seconds. So to give yourself something to look forward to, count backwards from 20, 19, 18, 17, etc. until when you get to 0. Go ahead and check it out. And then check again. It should be a lot looser. And it should feel like you have a lot more ability to open up without crunching down this backside, right? So if I'm so tight back here, this is not going to open up, but I'm still going to want to extend, and that's where a lot of crunching happens. We don't want that. So we want to lengthen this here so I can extend over and back rather than immediately crunching back. Okay, those are my 4 techniques. So let's cover them again. Lower cross syndrome, imbalance between muscles right here. There is an upper cross syndrome. You can look into that later. Lower cross syndrome, essentially we want to restore that length tension relationship. So what are we going to do? We're going to do the PNF kind of body hack on the posterior chain when we're seated, reaching towards our toes. We're going to do that with our quad stretch, pressing in 10 seconds 3 times. So that's hamstring is 10 seconds 3 times at 30 seconds. Quad, it's 30 seconds per leg. Okay, don't alternate, just stick with one for 30 seconds and then go to the other. So that's a minute 30. Then we do our posterior pelvic tilts. That takes about 30 seconds. And that's 2 minutes altogether. And then you do some of this. So less than like a 3-minute thing. With these guys here, some of my recommendations, if you're really, really tight, I would do 20 seconds and then find 3 different spots. So here's the worst spot, then move over here, then move over here, right? So move in and around that area before you switch to the other side to find that. Okay, so that's my recommendation for lower cross syndrome. Keep an eye on that, and feel free to share this with anybody you want to keep their body happy and healthy at home. Okay, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.